Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the Undergraduates of Political Science Course Union Grad School Information Night. I'm going to begin with a territorial acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen, Songhees, and Esquimalt peoples on whose territory the university stands, and the Lekwungen and Wisanish peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. I'd love to welcome you. My name is Emma Atwell, and I'm a second year political science major here at UVic and the Political Science Course Union Director of Student Affairs. I am so grateful for everyone that was able to make it today and to our lovely panelists who have taken time from their busy schedules to speak to us all. The way our meeting is going to be structured is it's going to start with a round of intros from our panelists, then about 20 minutes of structured questions for Dr. Glazos, our graduate director, and then 30 minutes of structured questions for our grad students and Dr. Glazos, and then 30 minutes at the end for Q&A to ask the panelists any burning questions that you may have. So I'd like to welcome all of our panelists. We have Dr. Simon Glazos, graduate director here at UVic. We have Sabrina Guzman-Skonitsky, Katie Berglund, and Jenna Hurechka. So I'm going to get them to start by giving a little spiel about themselves and who they are, how they got here, and then we'll move into our question period. So, Dr. Glazos, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, so I mean, many of you will know me from around the department. I'm Professor Simon Glezos. I teach political theory in the department. I am also currently the graduate director, and probably as we get into talking about admissions, we'll talk a little bit about what role that is. But that basically means that along with the graduate committee, I lead the process of graduate admissions. So going through the applications we get, ranking them, and then discussing who we're going to admit and working with the rest of the department to do that. To give a little background, as was mentioned just a little while ago, I am a UVic alumnus. I went to UVic many years ago. I then went to graduate school in the States, Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. So I can, in addition to giving the Canadian side of things, I can also, for those who are interested in going to America or abroad, I can say a little bit about what that process looks like. I'll say. My experience is my own, and although I have a fair bit of experience in terms of running, being on graduate committee and such, other people will have had different trajectories and have different insights, and so the things that I say, are not the only way of doing things. I'll just say so.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Sabrina, do you want to head up next?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Sabrina. I did my undergrad at Dalhousie University. I did an honors in international development studies with a minor in political science. And I'm currently a master's student at UVic in environmental studies, but I'm in the political ecology lab. So that's kind of how I link in to the political side of things. And yeah, I'm happy to speak more about my research, etc., as we get into things.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. Katie, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie. I use they, them, and she, her pronouns. I did my undergrad at UVic. I majored in political science and minored in applied ethics. I took a year off and missed school, so applied for grad school, and now I am just about, like, probably, I would say, a few weeks out from finishing like my final draft of my thesis. And then we'll set a defense. So I'll be done this semester. Um, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. I do have a supervisor that's on the other side of the country, co-supervisor on the other side of the country. So that's a little complicated. But yeah, I'm excited to talk more and share my experience at grad school with you all.
That's fantastic. Very exciting. All right, Jenna, you're our last one.
Hi everyone, my name is Jenna. I use she, her pronouns. I graduated same year as Katie, I think, in 2022, with major in political science and minor in sociology. And yeah, also a UPS alumni, me and Katie both. worked on many different positions with the UPS. And yeah, I took 2 years off technically, working mainly. And now I just entered my first year in my master's, which is at UVic. I'm doing a master's. It's called The Social Dimensions of Health. Um, and that's a program at UVic. So if anybody has any questions about that, but yeah, excited to talk to you all and see Simon. Nice to see you, Simon. It's been a while.
I love the UVic reunion. Thank you so much, Jenna. Okay, thank you, panelists. That's very greatly appreciated to give us a little bit of background. We're going to move into our questions for our graduate director, Dr. Glazos, and he's going to talk a little bit about the more like administrative and application side. And then, of course, our graduate students are welcome to weigh in as well. So we'll start with our first question for you, Dr. Glazos, if that's all right. Which is, what is the graduate committee looking for in a standout application?
Mhm. Yeah. So in terms of what we're looking for an application, it's worth saying that, you know, some of the stuff is what you'd expect, right? We are looking for a strong transcript. We're looking for good letters of recommendation, that sort of thing. And so certainly we're looking for just academically strong students. But more than that, as a committee, we have a kind of what we're interested in is getting graduate students that we think are going to be able to fit into the department. And by fit in more than anything, I mean in terms of their research, right? Because one of the things that we as a committee have to do is make sure, like, pair up incoming students with advisors. And so being able to have a sense of who can this person work with is kind of important, because frequently we'll get an application be like, this is a really great student, but they're proposing a research project that nobody in the department works on. And so we just can't accept a student like that. So part of it is that we're looking for who are they going to work with? How are they going to fit into the existing kind of research programs we have, especially at the graduate level? And then also the question we have is who's going to finish, basically. That we want to see evidence, not just that they're a strong student, but that they have a strong understanding of what graduate school looks like and is going to be expected of them. Because, you know, certainly excelling at the undergraduate level is a good sign that you will be able to excel at the graduate level. But not always. There's some additional stuff. And so we want to see that. So those are some of the things, right? That in addition to just looking for strong candidates, we're also fulfilling particular roles in the department, right? That we are trying to find people or accept people that can work with the faculty that we have, and that we have confidence are going to be able to finish up. And to understand some of the material issues behind that, because the whole point of this is to get a little behind the curtain sort of look. Um, First of all, like, for us, our funding is based on a variety of things in terms of what kind of funding we get for the graduate program, but one of them is completion rates and completion times. So basically, the more graduate students that we accept that end up completing and that end up completing within a particular time frame. I think for MAs it's 5 years, and for PhDs it's 9. That affects our funding, and so things like that are important, because it's also worth mentioning that the other reason that we want to make sure that we get strong graduate students is not just because we are a teaching and learning institution, but also because we need their labor. We need them as TAs and we need them as research assistants. And so we want to make sure that we have strong students that are going to be here consistently and that will be able to fulfill those roles for us.
That
So that's some of the stuff that we're looking for generally. How does that translate into a good application? So more than anything, right? The more of that work you can do for us, the easier it is, right? And so things then that I certainly tell to students who are saying they're planning on applying to graduate school, is in terms of your letter, right? And for those of you who have looked into the process, there's a variety of documents you need to provide as part of your application package. You send in your transcript, you submit 2 to 3 letters of reference, depending on what department or what university you're applying to. Um, Frequently, you provide a CV, you provide a writing sample, and you provide a different universities call it different things, but statement of intent, proposal, things like that. And that's intended to kind of present you as a potential grad student. And so within that letter, frequently sort of students will provide a bit of background on themselves, what brought them to political science, why do they find it interesting. Maybe that'll do some mapping out of like, if they've been to multiple universities, they might explain why they switched or things like that. um, and then usually there is a proposal of what kind of research they're there to do. And then depending on if they're doing applying in our department, we have 2 streams for a master's. We have a major research project and a thesis project. But either way, being able to articulate, this is the project that I'm envisioning working on while I'm there. Now, crucially, the proposal, everyone knows that the proposal is kind of a lie. And it's kind of a lie because you are proposing a project in your last year of your undergrad that you're not going to work on for probably at least another year after you've done like another year and a half of coursework. And of course, things are going to change and your ideas are going to shift and you'll learn more and all of that. So it's less, the proposal is less for us to like lock down, oh, good, this is what this person is working on, than it is for us to see sort of those 2 things that we talked about. One, that the student has an understanding of what an appropriate graduate school level project looks like, right? That on the one hand, they're not, sometimes applications that aren't as strong will get just sort of a general set of interests, right? This is the kind of thing that I'm interested in. It's like, well, that's great, but but do you have an idea of how to specifically articulate a research program, right? Are you able to specifically identify this is the kind of thing that I would work on? And again, whether or not you end up working on that specific thing, it shows us that at least you know how to articulate that. And it also shows that you have the correct expectations, right? Sometimes I'll say this. The first draft of my grad school application, I like wrote out a description for a project and I gave it to one of my advisors and they looked at it and said, okay, so this would probably take you about 20 years to do. Like, you have proposed several books. You need to propose something that is achievable in the time that's available to you, right? The graduate students are all nodding and recognizing. And so again, that's helpful for us because it goes, oh, okay, this person has a good sense of what graduate school looks like, what an MA looks like, what an MA thesis or major research project looks like. And so if we see those things, then we can say not just like, oh, great, they've got a good transcript, they've got strong letters of recommendation, but also they know what they're getting into. And therefore, we don't have to worry that they're going to show up and be either overwhelmed or not prepared in some way. And then again, also, right, if we have a clear articulation of this is my research project that I want to engage in, we can go, oh, okay, so that's a good project for Matt James to advise, or that's something that Mara Mara can work on. And just so you know, the way the process works, let me know if I'm rambling at some point, is we get all of the applications. There's a central website that we go through them all. And there's a graduate committee. So this year, the graduate committee is myself and Matt James and Michelle Bonner. Usually there's one representative from each of the subfields, but this year, Claire Cutler isn't able to participate. So we just have the 3 of us. Everybody reads all of the applications and we do a rough ranking of sort of, kind of just an A, B, C, D thing. And then once we've all done a rough ranking and compared our rankings, we go through and start looking at the nitty grittier of it, which is to sort of go like, okay, we've got all these great applicants, but then we have to think about, okay, who do we actually have to advise them, right? Like this person wants to come work with Scott Watson, but he's on sabbatical for the next year and a half or whatever. In this case, he's not, but maybe, and this can be tricky, right? Maybe we have 4 great applicants, but they all want to work with Professor Will Greaves, and he can't take on 4 MA students in 1 year. And so we kind of have to do that, where we have to balance out subfield representation, both just so we're not overloading one particular faculty member or subfield, and also so that we have, you know, a general diversity of students there who are going to be able to cover the various teaching obligations and things like that. Um, and then within that, then there's other considerations, right? We want to take into consideration equity issues. So we look at representation, things like that. Once we have what we think is a pretty good distribution, then we have to start working with the individual faculty members. So we'll send them packages being like, hey, we think these 3 students would be a good fit for you. Look over their applications and let us know, because then we have to deal with, you know, sometimes is which of them would you be willing to take on, and how many students would you be willing to take on? Because sometimes, yeah, faculty members are like, I have a huge grant that I'm finishing up and I can't take on a grad student this year. Or, yeah, I can take on a couple because I'm looking for research assistants or something like that. We hear back from them, we put together our initial rough list, and then we start sending out acceptances. And then it gets trickier because, of course, not everybody that we accept wants to come. And so then we start moving to our sort of second lists and so on and so forth. All of which is to say, if you're going through the acceptance process, you know, not hearing right away doesn't mean that you're not going to get asked sort of further down the line. So yeah, right. Those are, I think, you know, off the top of my head, those are sort of some of the things that students might not initially think about, right? And so, in terms of your application, right, I mentioned having a good uh, proposal for your project. It's also helpful for you to be able to show why you think the department is a good fit for you. So being able to identify, yeah, being able to identify certain potential advisors for you. In some cases, it's a good idea to contact advisors beforehand and see like, hey, I'm interested in working on the same stuff you are. It's this, and frequently, you know, advisors will be able to go, or faculty will be able to go, yeah, that looks like it's up my alley. You can say that I'm interested in advising. That doesn't promise anything because I've just mentioned all of the various things that are involved, but you know, it at least lets us know as a first pass, like, oh, okay, so you know, Jamie is at least interested in this project, so we can think of that in the mix. But more than that, being able to point out, you know, why you're interested in UVic specifically, or why you're interested in whatever university that you're applying to, and being able to show some familiarity with it, again, shows us a level of kind of preparation and appropriate expectations. So if you're going to a particular university and being able to say like, you know, there's particular programs or institutes there, right? If you're applying to be a theory student at UVic, being able to say like, I'm interested in also applying to the CSPT program, the Cultural, Social, and Political Thought program, or I think that the work that the Democratic Consortium is doing is really interesting, or my work involves stuff that would connect with the Center for Global Studies, or that sort of thing, right? Again, it shows that you already have a vision of how you would fit into our current way of doing things, and that you have thought seriously about where you're going to end up, which to us indicates like, oh, this is somebody who has, again, the correct sort of expectations and correct sort of preparation for the position. Um, that's a bunch of stuff. I don't know if people have follow-up questions on anything I said there, or want to. I also know that there's some other questions that we can ask, but yeah, that was some of the stuff that occurred to me to talk about.
That was fantastic. And I really appreciate you covering all of those bases and showing the thought process behind it, because I think that, again, like students really don't see that part, and
Yeah.
knowing that they're not screwed if they don't hear back
Yeah,
right
the process can be really opaque when you're on the other side of it. I recognize that, and that can be stressful for a variety of reasons. And so, you know, remember, it's helpful as you're applying to remember that, like, yeah, there's people on the other side of this process who aren't like, sitting at a high table, judging people thumbs up or thumbs down. More what it is a group of faculty who are like, we want and need graduate students for a variety of reasons in the department. And so, we want to work with you essentially. And this is kind of our initial opportunity to work with you. So, yeah.
I think that will make a lot of our current grad applicants feel a lot better. So thank you. The next question I'm going to ask of you is what kind of funding does UVic's MA program offer? And if you could even elaborate further on that, what does a good funding offer look like in general?
Yeah, so I can say a few things about funding. As I understand it, so this is a strange thing where this is my first year as graduate advisor, and one of the things about being graduate director is I've been on graduate committee before. I've been part of this reviewing the applications and putting that together. But when you're just a graduate committee, that's where your job kind of stops. Whereas grad director, you also have to handle the money side of things. And so this is my first time doing the money side of things. So I'm less knowledgeable about this part of the process. Currently, our package for an MA student is about $11,000, and that includes that you get some funding just straight as a sort of grant, and some through promised TA positions that are paid at a set scale. TAs at UVic are CUPE, they're union, and so how hours are paid and how they're structured is all set out by a framework agreement. And I believe that's true of all grad students in Canada. I'd be sort of amazed to find out. Maybe private universities, I don't know. Um, Now, that is not enough money. Not even close, because that doesn't include a tuition waiver. And so certainly the MA students can speak to, or the other graduate students can speak to how effective that is as an actual fund. And that's just part of the general defunding of academia across the board. And in terms of funding for graduate students, and partly that also has to do with decreasing funding graduate students in the humanities and social sciences versus the hard sciences. So there's that. Um, Identifying what a good package is kind of varies wildly because it depends very much on cost of living in any given university. And this is one of the strange things about graduate school and academia in general, is it's so spread out, right? That and this is a thing where for those who go on to professional academics, it's a very strange thing of like, if you want to go to law school and become a lawyer, then you look for jobs at any number of law firms. But like most cities will have, 1 to 2 universities, maybe, unless it's Toronto or New York. And lots of good universities are all over the place. And so, the difference between what kind of funding package you need if you go to U of T is going to be a lot different from the funding package that you need if you're going to go to the University of Lethbridge or something like that. And so, the more useful thing to know is that's going to be sort of a thing where talking to current graduate students will help you. And I'll say most universities, if you get accepted somewhere and you get a package, you will have the opportunity, or you should have the opportunity to talk to current graduate students. And that's one of the things that you can ask them, is to, if it's a city that you're not familiar with, just being like, what is the cost of living there like? How far does your funding package go? What opportunities are there for work? Things like that. Another thing to know about funding is this, if it hasn't already come up for you, which is in the Canadian system, there is both the departmental funding that you will get from the university, but a lot of funding comes from central federal funding bodies. And so for political science specifically, it's the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada, which is hilariously called SSHRC, which we all kind of are delighted by. SSHRC gives out a lot of funding. It's not a SSHRC, and there's similar bodies for the other. There's sort of we call it the Tri-Council. So there's the National Science and Education, then there's the other one. I forget. I only know SSHRC. That's all I need. And so it's not like um, uh, like scholarships or like awards where they give a, you one person in the department gets this award, one person. They fund a lot of students. I think something like 1/3 of all applicants end up getting funded through Shirk. And so if you are considering a master's or a PhD, you can apply for a Shirk in addition to basically you go through a process of applying for that sort of at the same time as you were applying for your various programs. And it's done in a kind of strange way where you basically apply and you submit if you aren't yet enrolled, if you are also applying to graduate schools, you submit to Shirk with like, these are 3 universities where I am considering or I am applying to, and then it kind of goes through them. You can also then, if you enter an MA program and you don't currently have a Shirk, you can apply for one for your second or third year, depending on how it goes. And so a lot of students supplement whatever departmental funding they get through Shirk funding. And usually departments kind of require that you apply for Shirk funding. It's a requirement for our department that all graduate students who don't currently hold a Shirk be applying for it. And that's a smart thing to do, both because it will give you money and you can exchange that for rent and food. It is also the case that because Shirk is such a central part of Canadian academia, money kind of follows money. And so applying for a Shirk for your master's, if you want to go on, getting a master's Shirk makes it more likely that you will get a PhD Shirk. Getting a PhD Shirk makes it more likely that you will get a postdoctoral Shirk, and so on and so forth. Having succeeded at getting grants from these funding bodies makes it more likely that you will get grants from those funding bodies going forward. So if you are thinking about graduate school, also be looking into Shirk and looking into how that process goes. The department and the university, I think somebody's bringing up the additional funding. You also get a UX President's Award if you enter with a Shirk. Yeah. And right now there's a slightly weird thing going on, which is it used to be the case that you weren't allowed to hold both a Shirk and departmental funding at UVic. That constraint has recently gone away, and now individual departments have to decide if they're going to allow people to hold both of them at the same time, which we as a department haven't currently reached a decision on. The point being, I think the main thing I would say about funding is this. UVic doesn't offer enough funding for its graduate students. It's just a straightforward fact. Most universities will not offer enough. And so you should be thinking about ways that you can supplement that if you're interested. And Shirk is one of the main ways that people supplement that. But also be aware of that as something. And here is the thing about funding is okay, how to put this. Most applicants to graduate school tend to be on the younger side. And certainly when I went to graduate school, I was um accepting the idea of like, okay, like I'm going to graduate school, I'm going to be kind of broke for a while. And that is just a thing that I'm going to do, and that's fine. And it is and it can be. What can be dangerous is getting caught in a cycle where, as a graduate student, especially if you're writing a thesis, where to be able to make ends meet, you have to take work. And because you have a day job of some kind, or even a night job, you don't have the time to write. And because you don't have the time to write, you don't finish in X amount of time. And so you have to stay on for another year. But to stay on for another year, you have to pay tuition, which means that you have to keep working your day job, which means you don't have time to write, and so on and so forth. And so people can get sort of caught in a cycle where, to be able to afford graduate school, they have to work in a way that means they don't have the time to finish graduate school. So, you know, it's not like you need me to say money is important to be able to live. You're aware of that. But it is to say that you need to be conscious of whatever funding you have, whether it's from the department, whether it's from Shirk, whether it's from a separate job, that it's going to give you the space and time to be able to actually do the work that you need to do and finish up in time. Because if not, you can find yourself sort of in trapped in a cycle like that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic. Lots of really valuable information. I'm going to invite the graduate students to add anything.
Yeah, I see a hand up there from
Yeah.
Katie.
Yeah, for sure. I went through the Shirk process and I got Shirk. But the way that funding worked at my department was that it was either or. So the money that I actually got from my department was more than Shirk, and they
Huh.
wouldn't let me like backfill it
Yeah.
essentially. So basically it says I got the award, but I declined to actually accept the money, which is another thing that I still recommend you do because yeah, I got Shirk, good job, thumbs up. But it didn't make sense with my funding to
Yeah.
actually accept that award. And so just whatever university you end up at, check on that, make sure of that. It is an option to still apply and have it. And they're like, yes. And you're just like, no, thank you, actually, because the department's going to take my money away if I say yes to you. So that's another note. Like Dr. Glazo said, it's really good. Proves that you can, even just the application process for Shirk really makes you write a good proposal. Or write a good, and it can change. It doesn't have to actually end up being the thing that you do your thesis or your project on. It can be different. But going through that process for me was really one of the first times that I like wrote a very good, theoretically sound proposal that was achievable. And you'll get all of that if you're working with somebody doing that application.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sabrina?
Yeah, I have so many things to say about Shirk. I guess I just wanted to start with because some folks might not know that it used to be the case if you got awarded Shirk, you could use it at whatever institution you wanted to, but they changed those rules. I don't know how long ago, and so you only get Shirk for a specific university, and you can put I think up to 3 or 4 options of where you apply, and so you might end up in the case where your first choice university, you don't get awarded Shirk for that, but in the case of sorry, what was it? I forget your name.
Katie?
Katie? Sabrina? Oh,
Sabrina.
Sabrina, are you referring to Katie?
I think Sabrina has frozen.
I think
Oh,
there you go.
Oh, she's back.
Sorry. I don't know where I cut off, but I was just gonna say that so I had the case where I got awarded Shirk to UVic, which was my first choice, and I got an offer from UBC that they were offering me more money than what UVic had offered me, but because I got Shirk, I used Shirk for my first year, and then the offer from UVic, that money went into my second year. And so you can end up in kind of odd situations like that. And yeah, I've had a lot of friends who've turned down Shirk because their first choice university gave them equal funding to Shirk. And so just to be aware of that. I forget what the other part I was going to say, so I'll just let someone else speak and then I can share later.
Jenna, go for it.
Yeah. So I didn't apply for Shirk for my first year. I tried, yeah, it's a long story, but I essentially was late and I wasn't able to submit. But yeah, I didn't know that that was a rule of that if you have Shirk, then you don't get the department funding
Well,
necessarily.
again, that's changed now. Like that,
Okay.
it used to be, and that used to be a university level policy. And so, yeah, they just, I think it was last year they changed that.
Okay.
And so departments are still, I think, figuring out what they're going to do.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, I still can I applied for this year, so I mean, I got my department funding this year and then next year hopefully I'll get the Shirk. And so in the end it kind of can still work out. And so yeah, it's kind of maybe look into wherever you're applying to and see what their rules are. And kind of have to be strategic about it potentially.
And maybe something else I'll mention as a thing that I can contribute, which is so thank you to the graduate students because again, since I went to the States, I never went through Shirk. And as a result to this day, I've never held a Shirk grant on anything. A couple things to mention. One, and I believe this is still the case, you have to I don't know if you have to be a Canadian citizen to apply for Shirk, but yeah, as a citizen, certainly you have to have some sort of permanent resident status, and I think it may be citizenship. Because I've had students who midway through their PhDs got their citizenship and suddenly could apply for Shirk, which was very exciting for them. But it's also the case, or at least it used to be the case, that you could apply for Shirk for funding for universities outside of Canada as well. That if you were a Canadian citizen, you could apply for funding to go elsewhere. So again, I was at Johns Hopkins, and one of my friends there had done his master's at York and then came to Hopkins to do his PhD, and he had Shirk funding for that. But if you are thinking about applying to the in America, there it's much more done through individual universities. There isn't, there are some federal and state level funding bodies, but by and large, it's more that money gets funneled through the universities themselves rather than having a kind of outside process like Canada does. And there's benefits to that. It cuts down on a lot of paperwork. Like I was just able to apply to universities, and they were just like, "Here is the money that we can offer you," and it was more than I would have gotten from Canadian universities. It also means that in America, I think there's a lot more funding packages are a lot more varied than they are in Canada, or rather, in Canada, the kind of existence of these central federal funding bodies can produce a little bit of a leveling effect. Whereas in America, it's if you're going to a fancy, wealthy private university, they are going to have more money than a big state school, and they're going to have more money than a smaller state school. And so, in a way, in Canada, I think you have a little bit more space to go, okay, like what's the best university fit for me? And then you have a couple of ways in which you can get funding. In America, there's a certain amount of if you end up going to not one of the top tier universities, you're just not going to be able to get a funding package that's maybe livable.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. This is a huge part of grad school from what I understand, so I'm sure everyone really appreciates it. I think I'm gonna move into our next set of questions, if that's all right. These are more for our grad students, but Dr. Glazos, at any time, feel free to add. So we're gonna start with our very surface, well, not surface level question, but our first question to introduce everything. Students, why did you choose your graduate program, and how did you decide between the different kinds of programs, such as an MRP, a thesis, or a course-based? And maybe explain which one you're in. Anyone want to go first?
I can start.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, before I applied, I was considering, I knew I wanted to do my master's in relation to like public health or policy, that kind of realm. And so there's kind of three programs at UVic that interested me. There's the Master's of Public Administration, which is a course-based or thesis-based uh, program. There's also the MPH program, Masters of Public Health, which also both of you can do either course-based or thesis. And then the program that I ended up going with was the Social Dimensions of Health program. And the reason why I ended up going with that, which is a thesis-based program, is the other two programs were all online, and I really wanted that kind of experience of going to classes and meeting other grad students, and I'm having that full kind of grad student experience. And also funding wise, a thesis-based master's, you're always going to get more funding. And usually tuition costs are a lot lower as well. So a lot of course-based master's, you'll maybe get an entrance scholarship, and then yeah, the tuition is just going to be a lot more. But at the end of the day, um, like the MPH program, the MPA program, they're a lot more, you kind of know what kind of employment you're going into afterwards, and it's a lot more of a professional master's program, which can be really, nice for if you kind of know what you want to do with it. Um, Whereas the thesis based is a little bit more up in the air. Um, the job prospects, you kind of have to create your own path. But there's still, I mean, getting a master's is going to be really great either way. After work, unfortunately, there's no practicum option in my program. But I think some master's thesis programs potentially have that. I'm not sure. And yeah, I think that answers the questions. But yeah, my program is interdisciplinary, so that was really interesting to me. So I had to actually have two supervisors. So one of my supervisors is Justin Leafso in the poli sci department, and then my other advisor is Karen Urbanowski, who is in um, the public health professor, and she's doing some really cool research on substance use and safe supply. So it's really cool to be able to kind of combine my interest interdisciplinary and write a thesis based on that. So that's kind of about the SDH program. And yeah, if you have any questions about the SDH program, you can let me know.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Sabrina, do you want to talk about your experiences?
Sure. Yeah. I didn't mention this in my introduction, but I graduated in April 2020. And so I had done like an honors thesis and intended to do grad school at some point, but with the pandemic, I worked for 2 years remotely, and honestly was very burnt out from Zoom work and wanted to go back into real life, quote unquote. And so I'd been waiting for classes to return in person. So that was kind of the main reason I took such a long break. And in that time when I was applying for work, I found that it was difficult to explain to people because I wanted to work in the climate sector, how international development studies and even political science, how that relates. I think with poli sci, people can see that more, but my major was international development. And so I felt like I had a lot of explaining I had to do, even though most of my papers I'd written in undergrad were about like environment and development, environment and politics. And so I really wanted a degree that had environment or climate in the title, which seems like a very surface level thing, but when you're on the job market, it actually can be very important. And so I knew I wanted to do research. That was very clear. So I only looked at thesis programs. And then in a very service level way, like I grew up in Vancouver and I went to Dalhousie for my undergrad, and I was like, I'm never leaving the West Coast again. So I only applied to UVic and UBC. I applied to sociology as well as environmental studies just because there was a focus in UBC. Their sociology program has a sub focus on environment, community, and social movements. But honestly, it was just to have a backup because UVic was definitely my first choice. And I'd applied for environmental studies as an undergrad, but just didn't go. And so I think it was always in the back of my mind that I resonated with the university and with the program. And specifically, like the fact that the master's, or I should say the graduate program, was very applied research focused, very community engaged, a lot of research and collaboration with First Nations. And a lot of the professors, especially in the political ecology lab, their work is more what you might call like activist research. And so that really gravitated me towards that department.
Thank you. Congratulations on getting into your first choice. That's awesome. Okay, Katie. Oh, the 6-year-old is here.
My meeting. Do you want to say hi to everybody? Hi, everyone. This is Waverly.
Hi.
Okay.
Making a cameo.
Love a good cameo. Yeah, so I knew that I wanted to do a research-based master's, so thesis-based. In part because I wanted to open the door for a PhD. So I would have that. I think it's much less common to see people doing like course-based masters, specifically in like pure political science, than going on to a PhD. So I wanted that research and that kind of training to be able to do research in a meaningful way. I ended up at SFU in poli sci, purely well, two things. Based off of the funding, and based off of my supervisor, my area and like field of interest is political behavior. And you need a kind of good quantitative background for a lot of that work. And that's something that I didn't get a lot of at UVic. I got many other things which were great and fantastic, but didn't necessarily get that kind of quantitative methods. So political behavior in Canada is a very small field. There's like 10 of them, that one, two, or three of them who I work with in my department. Anyways, it was very much what I wanted to research and what school was the best fit for that. And the program was just, I was going to do a research-based master's anywhere I went. So.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm gonna pose another question. How did you know it was the right time for you to pursue graduate studies versus, taking a gap year off to work, travel, whatever? Katie, you're on my screen. You're welcome to start. Or if we want to start back with Jenna, that's fine. Katie, you have your mic off, so sure.
I'll go quick. I took a year off in between my undergrad and my master's, and not off. I worked for Grace Lohr, who's the MLA for Victoria Beacon Hill. I worked in her community office, and did a whole bunch of like communications work and event planning and casework and things like that. And I really loved it. And I missed the kind of rigor of being in academia. I took Grace out for coffee and was like, hey, so just so you know, like I'm applying. And she's like, to grad school. So she could sense that in me, that like that was something that I was still really interested in. So I had my year working and then decided, you know what? Yeah, I want to go back. I want to do it. Now's a good time as ever. It wasn't like a job that there was like a clear kind of like up ramp. I mean, in government, there always kind of is. Once you're in government, you get internal postings and things like that. But there wasn't like a manager, or there wasn't like a next kind of step there. So it was a pretty good place for me to be like, no, I can leave this pretty easily. And yeah, head off to grad school. I woke up for a good solid month. I was like, I miss school. I miss school. I should go back to school. I should go to grad school. Yeah.
That's me at the end of the summer every year. So I get it. Sabrina, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, most of what I shared before. And I think also, I don't want to get too much into detail because I know we have more questions and not much time, but just around like, so in my research, I basically ran a program, and this was something I wanted to create and offer out in the world, and was hard to find funding for that. And so actually, I kind of used the master's to essentially be my little incubator for this program, which I can go into more detail later. But essentially, like my research is around mental health and climate change and art. And at the nonprofit I worked with before I came to grad school, we wanted to do work like that, but funders were just not biting. And so when I got the SSHRC funding, it was like, okay, I could actually use this to do this program. So that's very brief, but it was somewhat strategic.
Hey, if it works. Okay, who has Jenna?
Yeah, I can add just so right before I graduated, I applied for the legislative internship program at the BC legislature. So I ended up getting a position. So that wouldn't start until next January. So that meant I kind of had the summer and fall to just work. I ended up getting a job in the government. But yeah, definitely it's like as soon as I was done school, I think this happens to everybody, but you kind of feel a little bit lost, just without that routine of school. And yeah, it's like you kind of get to explore your identity again of like, what are you like outside of school? So I think it's a great opportunity to take a gap year from grad school sometimes to really figure out if you actually want to go to grad school. Um, and yeah, I mean, you can also just go straight into grad school and figure it out there as well. But I think that was really nice for me. Um, yeah, I think taking a year off is really nice. And then like traveling, I was able to do some traveling. I ended up from the legislative internship program, I was able to get a job as a policy analyst with the BC government. And so all of this experience that I kind of took with me, I think made me a better applicant for grad school for sure. And then also um, just made me like be more sure, like, do I really want to go into grad school? And do I have like a project that I am like excited enough about that I'm willing to spend 2 years on? Because you really have to think about that as well. And so, but even then you get into grad school and it's can be quite intense at first. And you're like, oh no, did I make the right decision? And luckily, I've really eased that, and I'm really happy that I'm in grad school now. But it's a big commitment, right? To spend 2 years of your life and be a broke student again for 2 years, especially after working. But yeah, I think taking that self time to really consider if grad school is for you and what kind of grad schools that are out there and really exploring your interests and things like that. So um, everyone's different though, so if you do want to go in straight in, that I think that's okay too. But I think it really benefited me to take those 2 years to also gain experience. I think I'm gonna be well suited after graduating my master's. I have like both the work experience and now the education, so I think I'm feeling pretty good about my job prospects after as well.
Thank you. That's fantastic from all of you. I really appreciate the insight. Okay, I'm gonna say we're gonna do questions until like 6:40, and then we'll have like a 20-minute question Q&A if that's all right with everyone, depending on how we get through. But I was gonna ask, what considerations should you make when choosing a potential supervisor for grad school? Anyone? And Dr. Glazos, you're welcome to join in. Katie, I saw your hand.
I think the biggest thing now, as I'm with other people in my cohort who are working on final projects or theses, is um, understanding like the working style of your supervisor is important. I have a supervisor who is very hands-on, who I can easily meet with once or twice, like a month if I need it or more. Very willing to hop on a Zoom call, very willing to like read sections of my work and get it back to me in a pretty like short amount of time, which has been like really crucial for me to kind of have those mini deadlines kind of built in as I'm writing. I have a dear friend whose supervisor is the opposite and very hands off. She loves that because she can work and have go at her own pace and do all of that. And then when they come together, then it's a little bit more of a okay, now you have a month's worth of work to kind of sift through instead of the little snippets that I send. I think also in terms of choosing a supervisor, what kind of and this might be harder to know when you're just at the undergrad level, kind of approaching people or thinking about people, what kind of connections they have, whether that to be to certain research institutes, whether that to be to certain like groups, um, whether that be to other academics in the field that they like co-author a whole bunch with, kind of those things like, so it really, yeah, depends on what kind of subfield that you want, what you're interested in. But really like look, I mean, I did this with mine before applying. I went on Google Scholar, looked at their everything they've published, read their top papers, see what kind of things, how they write, who they collaborate with often. Um, all of that was important to me when picking a supervisor.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Jenna or Sabrina? Would you like to add anything?
I think Simon had a little.
Oh, Simon, I'm sorry.
sorry,
Yes,
Dr.
you
That's
did.
okay.
Please go ahead.
I was gonna say maybe two things. Thing one is I think also it's important to don't just look for one supervisor. If there's like a person that you're really excited to work with, great, but make sure that there's other faculty in the department that you could imagine working with, because all of these things happen on such a lag time and stuff can happen. Like somebody goes on parental leave or gets sick or, in one case, they're like moved jobs. And you don't want to end up in a situation where you're like, oh, like there's nothing for me here if this one person goes. That's not a, it can work, but it's a risk. So I would say make sure that you're going somewhere where there's more than one person that you can imagine working with. And I think Katie made some great points about the sort of working style of the advisor, and that's where I'd say that when you get accepted to places, you know, that's when we're evaluating you, and then when there's the admissions, you're evaluating us. And it's, I mentioned being able to talk to other graduate students. You should always talk to your proposed advisor, and those are some of the questions that you can ask is what's your advising style, and you will get a sense of if you think that would be a good fit for you. So that's stuff that you can and should ask about at various points in the process.
Fantastic. Thank you. Your perspective is very appreciated on this. So thank you, Dr. Glazos. Sabrina or Jenna, is there anything you'd like to add? You can say no.
I don't think I have too much to add, but I mean, reach out to supervisors you might want to work with early before you're applying. You can set up a Zoom call or even just email back and forth, kind of give them the ideas that you have for your research beforehand, and they can answer in an email if that sounds like that's something that would be interesting to them. For my program, I had to have 2 supervisors lined up before like when I applied. So that takes a lot of work. So also just know when you're applying to grad school, it's a lot of work. So make sure you carve out time for yourself to do that and start early if you can.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I just want to echo a lot of what was shared. And same thing in environmental studies. Your application doesn't even get looked at unless there's like a supervisor who's already agreed that they might consider you. And in my case, like what Dr. Glazo said, like the first person I talked to, he was like, I'm actually at my cap, but I think there's another person who could take you. And then she ended up being my supervisor. And I think what's interesting in my case is that she's not a subject matter expert in what my research is, but we have really shared interests generally. And like when you're talking about what are their connections, also like, are they doing what you would want to do? Like in the world, and maybe not outside of academia. Like for her, like she does a lot of research with policymakers, with community, and with like multilateral kind of stakeholder things. And so I want to do that work not as a professor like out in the world, but having her as a mentor has been amazing. And for me, I think honestly, having a supervisor that's a good mentor is way more important than if they are the expert in your research. And sometimes that can really work against you actually, because they might want to micromanage your research if they think they know everything about that topic. And I've seen that a lot. And so I would say that's really important. I think those were the 2 main things I wanted to share, but just, and then around like applications, just to share about the time that Jenna was saying, like applying to SSHRC, in my opinion, takes way more time than applying to grad school, and you have to apply quite early. And so I tell people to start really early, like it's a December 1st deadline. I think I started in August to research and write my proposal. I was also working at the time, so I had to juggle that, but just to really reemphasize that, I can't emphasize that more.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm gonna share our last question before I open the floor to Q&A, which is what can you do in your undergrad to set yourself up for success in grad school? And with that, how did you develop relationships with your professors in undergrad for the purpose of writing good letters of recommendation? if anyone would like to, if anyone has any
I can
thoughts.
start us off again.
Yes, great, go for it.
I'm probably gonna answer the like how you make good relationships with profs in your undergrad to get those letters. I would say being an involved student is always good. Like Jenna, like we were on the EPS, so we had faculty, like we were in the physical place where professors were, which was helpful. You would see them in the halls. I did Model United Nations when I was at UVic. We had a faculty supervisor who went with us when we went on Model UN trips, right? So that's outside of, yes, actual class time, but getting to know them a little bit more socially almost is nice. It kind of breaks down that barrier of feeling like, because the thing that happens when you're in grad school is you're not just a student anymore, you're also a colleague in some regards. And so professors will start to treat you like colleagues because you're doing the work, you're grading for their class, and you're doing whatever, you're TAing. So, I mean, I think really doing well in the class too, like you want to make sure that people giving you reference letters are going to say nice things and say good things about you. Um, I have, I know of, yeah, I've heard some stories from both student and professor side of the whole reference letter thing. And it, you know, write to people and ask people who you feel confident that they will give you a good recommendation. And a little tidbit on that, professors are very busy. Give them a lot of time to write your reference letters and send them reminders. Like if you have not heard back from someone, they're like, yes, I will write you this reference letter. It is due on this day. If you haven't gotten it, however many weeks before the deadline, if it's a week before the deadline and you haven't gotten it and the portal says, send an email, follow up, like don't just assume, cross your fingers that it's going to happen. They're people juggling a lot often, especially if they have like, if you're the graduate chair and you have all of these other responsibilities and you teach and you have your own research and life. So I would say that how to generally set yourself up for success in undergrad. Um, I don't know, for me, it was just being involved. There's lots of things that the university does, like talks, things that look interesting to just like kind of broaden your perspectives and horizons. Coming to things like this, talking to grad students in the department, like, I think there's a lot, but I will stop there.
Thank you so much. Very positive stuff to hear. Sabrina, Jenna, Dr. Glazos, anyone have thoughts, feelings? Jenna?
I'll definitely echo what Katie said about profs being very busy. And some profs you can even just offer like, I can give you all of the grades that I got in your class and just kind of giving them reminders because they have a lot of students. So sometimes they may not remember specifics about you. You can give them a couple lines. Sometimes I've had profs be like, oh, can you write some stuff out for me to add in the letter? So a lot of profs, they want to help you, right? They want to support you in your journey. So if you can help them help you, that's always nice. And yeah, like Katie said, just get involved and go to office hours. If you have a prof that you really admire and you're really enjoying their class, stop in and just like go for a chat. Profs enjoy talking to students. And so yeah, just get involved in those ways. And UPS is a great way. So a lot of you guys are already doing the things, and are ahead of the game. So yeah, that's my advice.
Thank you so much. Sabrina, did you want to talk more about like the adding CV and or anything about?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of other things to
Okay,
share.
well
That was
then
some
you
very
can
basic
go off
things
on
about
that
just
too.
sending your CV to your person who's writing you a reference letter, because they might not know about all this other stuff you do outside of being a student. So that was all I was going to say about that. Yeah, there's quite a number of things. So one thing, like I did an honors thesis, and so that was a great opportunity just to even learn if I want to do research. And I had that experience, and I don't know how it works at UVic. In my program, they actually didn't want us to do primary research, but I insisted. So I did do interviews. And so having that experience was really useful. And right after I graduated, I was hired as a research assistant. And so actually, most of my references were not from people who taught me, but were for people I worked with as a research assistant for like Shirk, etc. And so that was a really good experience. I heard that you guys have a poli-sci undergrad journal, so we did too, and I got published in that. I've heard many people say that that's one of the big things Shirk does look for, is if you have any publications on your resume when you apply. So those kinds of experiences I think are really important. I also worked at the student union and got to interact with grad students, international students, a range of students, and I think that really gave me so much perspective, not just on grad school, but just like different walks of life, different places people went to school and lived, etc. And I think just getting that array of experiences is so useful generally. And then the last thing I wanted to share was about just doing different experiences. Like I got to do a public policy advocacy summer school in Ottawa for 2 weeks, and the person who led that summer school was a teacher of mine, so got to get to know him better through that, and then also got to meet poli-sci students from various universities across Canada, and so again, learning about their experiences. And then if you can present, I don't know if you folks have an undergraduate conference or anything, but I got to present at the undergraduate conference that they did for the Faculty of Social Sciences at Dalhousie and get to experience that again. And I think these are things that are great for your CV, but I honestly think they were more useful for me just to get a sense of like what I guess academia is like, or what being a researcher is like.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to add to any of that before I open the floor for Q&A? You don't have to. I can also start taking questions. I'm sure Chris, Skyla, and our other attendees have lots. So yeah, thank you all for answering my questions. I'm going to open the floor to anyone else who's in attendance. If you could drop questions in the chat or raise your hand, that'd probably be the best. And if we don't have that many, I have backup questions too, because there's always more that can be asked. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, it's the time to ask them about anything. Oh, Sabrina also offered that she is willing to be emailed. Thank you, Sabrina. Chris, what is your question?
Okay, so all of the panelists have kind of answered this a little bit, but I did kind of want to touch on more of like where you're living for grad school, like how big of an impact that made for you, like where you were considering, because one of the things that I've been considering when I've been applying to grad schools is like, where do I actually want to live for 2 years? And like, how much of a difference is that going to make? Again, kind of what Dr. Glazo said in terms of like cost of living, but also like, it's like, do I want to actually be in Toronto or like not really because it's really expensive? So like, how much of that kind of consideration did you folks make when you chose your program? And were there like places that you turned away? Like Sabrina, you were saying you wouldn't want to move away from the West Coast. Yeah.
I considered, I applied to UBC, SFU, and McGill. I got into SFU and McGill. SFU did end up giving me more money, but I can really considered McGill. I priced it out, and flights within Canada are so expensive for me to come home and see family. It ended up being almost the same, like what I would be saving in rent in Montreal and like cost of living. Um, I would basically just break even again once I factor in like round trip flights twice a year to come home and see family. So that was a consideration. Um, I think, yeah, I'm familiar with Vancouver, so that wasn't like, well, Burnaby technically wasn't a big switch for me. but definitely like the actual apartment that I live in was a big hunt and a big search. And I wanted to be close enough to school, but also not pay an exorbitant amount of money in rent. So yeah, I think it mattered. Less so about the kind of life I lead in community in a certain place, and more so about like just kind of more pure hard cost of living.
Um, yeah, so I'll say my experience was so I went straight from a BA into a PhD program because that's more common in the States. They tend to do this is just a thing to know. In the States, there's less separate master's programs. In Canada, it tends to be you do your MA and then your PhD. Um, and so, I applied to several American universities and a couple of Canadian universities. Um, and so was ended up choosing between sort of three big American cities, Chicago, Minneapolis, and Baltimore, and I ended up going with Baltimore. And that was a big shift for moving from Victoria to Baltimore for 6 years, which at that time Baltimore had the highest murder rate in America, and was a real experience. So things that I would say are this. Yeah, right. Like where you're going to live is a big part of your quality of life. And a graduate school is hard enough without having to be somewhere that you don't like. And so thinking about this as a holistic life thing, and again, right, that weird thing of I'm interested in this job and suddenly I might end up living in Baltimore for 6 years or whatever. Um, I'll say the flip side, and this is definitely something that you can get from, again, if you get accepted somewhere and you get to talk to the current grad students, and you can also potentially talk to current grad students even before you apply, right? Frequently, universities will have graduate student societies and such. It's helpful to know that um, wherever you go, you will usually be part of an incoming class of people who are very much in the same boat as you. And so graduate school, in my experience, especially for more academic programs, will has a certain summer camp element to it, where you're a bunch of people that are new to town and don't know anybody, and that can create a certain bonding experience. And so the point of that being that, yeah, think about the city, but also be aware that it's not like you are showing up in a city that you've never been before and are just kind of let loose. There's going to be a cohort of people who are going through very similar experiences to you. And so that can provide you with a kind of built-in social circle. And, not automatically, and it's not guaranteed, and your mileage may vary, but that is something that can very much ease that transition and make it so that, you know, think about what you want from a place where you live, but also be aware that you might be able to sort of handle something more different and more surprising than you thought.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna jump in and say, I really agree. I think what it comes down to for me, and obviously there's a lot of reasons to stay on the West Coast, but the big part was being close to family. Like living in Halifax for 3 years and experiencing, yeah, it's like $800 to get home. That was really tough, especially during the COVID years. And so I really prioritize, and I realized part of that is the support network, right? And so wherever you go, do you have some kind of support network either that is in place or you can create? And sometimes your graduate cohort can be that. But, for me, last term, I had a really tough time mental health wise. And because I was able to just get on a ferry and go home for a week during reading break, that helped me so much. And so you thinking about that, I think is really important. And this is very like a straightforward thing, but like actually going to the place you're considering moving to, because when I moved to Halifax, I'd never been there before, and it was a shock on many levels. And so I highly recommend that. And not the first time that I've been to Victoria, but one of the first times I went to Victoria when I was thinking about going to grad school, I had like a very strong like intuition moment of like, I feel like I'm meant to be here. And so I would say like trust those kind of cues that you get from the universe about that. I wouldn't underestimate that.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. Do we have any other questions from our attendees? Ooh, Anna Mara, just put one in the chat, and also Skyla has one. Skyla, do you want to go first and then I'll get Anna Mara's? Or I don't, yeah.
It seems like Anna shot the question before I put my hand up.
Okay,
So like,
sure. Okay. I will read it out loud, but it says, I know many funding and grad applications ask for multiple academic references. Wondering if anyone would have advice for someone who was not close with the many professors and is already graduating. Is it still okay to reach out to profs who didn't have a strong personal relationship with as well?
I can partly take this as a professor. First of all, always okay to reach out. That's um, something that's very much part of the job, and it's also worth saying, right? There was some good advice on talking to faculty early and giving them as much time as you can in terms of writing a letter, and that's always good. The flip side is sometimes I think students can be very hesitant about approaching faculty to get letters of reference. And it's worth remembering that no professor got where they are without asking so many people for so many letters. And there is a certain amount of this is how you pay it forward or pay it back or whatever. So I can only speak for myself, which is that I think you can always ask. And it's certainly the case that yeah, sometimes I will say to a student, if there's professors that know you better than me, you would probably get a better letter from them. And also, I will always try to be honest about where I will say to a student, like, okay, so I don't know you very well. You were in two of my classes, so what I'll be able to say is, you got these kinds of grades, you know, and what I can sort of fill out. So that being said, also, if it's somebody that you don't know very well, the more you can give them to work with, the better. So especially if you are a former student of theirs, being able to show up and say, okay, so like I took these classes from you in these years and got these grades. A great thing is if you still have copies of graded papers that you can pass along, either when you're asking or when they're writing. I will usually ask to say like, hey, do you still have copies of your work with my comments on it? Because then I can go through and remember and have that kind of spark things. And yeah, right. It's true. Not everybody, for a variety of reasons, will have developed kind of personal relationships with any or enough faculty members to be able to provide multiple academic references. And yeah, right. Certainly, professors who have worked with students as an honors advisor or had them help as a research assistant, something like that, are yeah going to be able to provide a more detailed and personal account. But even just having a professor being able to go, this person got an A in my class. That's not a common grade. They wrote a really interesting paper on this. They're really good at doing something like that, that's still a good letter of reference, and so you don't have to have close personal relationships. But if you've got the time and you are thinking about that, spending some time developing those relationships is never a bad thing.
Amazing. Thank you. Anyone else want to add, or Skyla had a question as well? And Mara says, thank you. Skyla, what is your question?
okay, this may just be like Skyla needs to be patient and wait until she receives any emails from the graduate programs that she's applying for. But do people have recommendations in relation to like, do universities send emails if you don't get in? So, or do you just like cut your losses if like you haven't received an email? And like, what is usually like the turnaround? Like, is it usually a month or is it a month and a half, 2 months? Like, how does that work? Maybe UVic has a different kind of style. I don't know. Maybe I just need to chill out, but
Yeah. So again, I can speak to the UVic sort of process. It'll depend on when different universities set their specific deadlines. But by and large, most Canadian universities, I think, are going to be making their decisions in February. But again, How that then rolls out will differ depending on the university and depending on a lot of intangibles. Again, right, taking time to hear back from faculty members on how many students they can take, waiting to hear back on who has accepted in the first round or not. And so, like, the way, apparently, again, this is my first year doing it on this side, is we tend to roll it out, acceptances in batches, which is to say, you know, we're aiming for. So here's the thing, right? Like, we have an aim of, like, we want 10 to 12 MA students and 3 or so PhD students. But we probably won't send out 11 acceptance letters. We will probably send out sort of 5 to start with, and then follow up with others as we start hearing back, and then replace, because not everyone's going to say yes or no. And so, and that process can be quite ongoing depending upon how things happen, right? Usually, we are hoping to have our acceptances nailed down by kind of April. So I'll say this: post April, it becomes increasingly unlikely that you're going to get an acceptance. It's not impossible and it's not unheard of, but it's unlikely. In the American system, hilariously, they I think it's April 15th. Basically, all the universities agreed on a cutoff point for when graduate students had to accept, because otherwise there would be the thing where universities would start creeping their deadline forward, to get ahead of everybody else. And so everybody kind of did a detente and went, we're all going to have one day be our deadline for when students have to say yes. But yeah, so it can take a while and it can drag on in that regards. Um, oh, and hang on, I was going to say one other thing about what you asked. Nope, it's gone right out of my head. Apologies. Maybe it'll come back.
I think to add on to that, I think I got my acceptance from SFU and McGill. I think I want to say early March. I think if I'm recalling correctly. And when I did not get accepted into UBC, I got an email saying you are not accepted. So I'm assuming that's most of the people I know that didn't get into other schools got some type of you were not successful in this blah 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 blah, this kind of the sad letter that sorry you didn't make it letter, which wasn't a letter, it was just an email. But I have heard of students just not hearing, and maybe that's a sign that particular department is maybe a little disorganized and maybe you don't want to be there in the first place. Who knows? Or you could have just slipped through the cracks, so it doesn't hurt if it gets to April and you haven't heard anything to follow up.
Thank you so much. Chris has a question, and I think that will be our last one for today. Oh, Dr. Glazos, were you going to add something? No? Okay. Yes, Chris, what is your question?
Yeah, just as a final question. So, I've heard that, like, once you get different acceptance offers in, you can kind of like play this game of like matching funding to other schools and that kind of thing. But like no one's actually told me, like, how do I actually do that? Like, what are the like social conventions around sending those emails? How do you do that in like a respectful way to like get schools to match other schools with funding? What does it actually look like?
I had the option to do this if I wanted to, but McGill didn't give me as much money. So the way that it worked at SFU is I got my offer, I met with my supervisor, and then I did say, well, I'm waiting to hear back from McGill and UBC. And then in that conversation, my supervisor said, hey, if you get more money, if you get a better offer from another school, send it to us, let us know. Send them the actual acceptance letter, the official thing. And they had extra money to match it, if not to do better than it. So it was kind of a thing that came up after I was accepted at one place. I had met with my supervisor. We talked through it. We talked about other things. And then she said that, like, yes, we have this whatever fellowship entrance something, whatever they keep kind of in their in their bank account to keep the grad students that they want, essentially. And that was my experience and an experience of a few other friends. So
Yeah, and I can jump in. Yeah, it's helpful to remember generally, again, right, as I said, you know, you spend a long time trying to get the university to like you, to accept you, and then once you decide you're going, then you're going to spend a lot more time trying to get them to like you, and there's this very short window where they're trying to get you to like them, and you should by all means take advantage of that. And so, it's we're saying like a thing that you can, yeah, as has been mentioned, just say is especially if it's somewhere that you're interested in going, you can say to whoever your contact is, either a supervisor or the graduate director, look, I'm really interested in this. Such and such place is offering me more money, or even just I am concerned about the cost of living there and that the funding that I'm being provided just isn't going to be enough. And yeah, right, then there's stuff that we can do. Sometimes it's, as I said, like there's some pots of money around that we can maybe rejigger things. Sometimes it's the case that we can reach out to faculty and go like the supervisor and say, hey, do you have any research funds? Could you offer this student an RA-ship or something like that? Or even ask around the department and be like, even if you're not advising a student, maybe you're looking for an RA, can we earmark that for this student? So yeah, right. There are things that a department can do. And so, yeah, you can just sort of say, um, um, I think, okay, I say this, I didn't do this. And I think because I was worried that, like, I don't know, they'll think I'm greedy or something. And I think, certainly speaking for myself, like we are aware of that the funding we provide is not adequate, and we are aware that the cost of living in Victoria is high. And so somebody coming to us with those concerns, that's not going to be surprising, and it's not really gonna make us think badly of the applicants. The worst case scenario is it's going to make us go, I'm sorry, we just don't have anything. And what we've offered is what we can offer. But it certainly doesn't hurt to ask, especially if you find yourself in a situation where, oh, I'm choosing between two or more programs, and there's a difference between the place I'm most interested in going and the place that's offering me the best package. And if that's the case, by all means, bring that to especially your first choice, but even your other choices, to see if they can do something about that.
That is amazing. Well, if we don't have anything to add to that question, I think we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you all so much for coming and giving your thoughts and feelings and opinions.
Maybe I'll just jump in with one last thing, which
Yes,
is,
of course.
as the grad director, if people end up with other questions, either about the UVic grad program or about grad school in general, you're always welcome to get in touch with me, and I'm happy to talk to you about that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You've been so generous with your time. And Katie and Sabrina have also put their emails in the chat and have been generous to offer. Oh, and Jenna, thank you all. That's so lovely. Really appreciate it. I know that Skyla and Chris were really excited to come tonight and ask you guys questions and hear what you had to say. And I'm sure the other students who are here too felt the same. So yes, super grateful. And it's been a real pleasure to get to hear from you all tonight. Thank you. Anyway, I will probably, oh, yes, thank you so much. That's what Anna Mara is saying. Anyway, I'm going to end the meeting now, but thank you again. And hopefully we will speak soon. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.